The wind rolled across the empty plains like a whisper from the grave, tugging at Asa Calder's coat as he rode slow along the trail. He had long since grown used to the silence of these hills, a silence broken only by the creak of saddle leather or the hollow call of a crow overhead. Asa was a loner by choice, or so he told himself. Folks in town called him cold, stone-hearted, and some even whispered he had a wolf's soul instead of a man's. He didn't mind. He hadn't needed anyone in years. Not since the war. Not since the fire that took everything he might have loved. But today was different. Today he carried blood money in his pocket. The man who hired him was a rancher's son from Red Hollow, mean-eyed and sharp-tongued. He'd slid the coins across the saloon table like he was tossing scraps to a hound. "Find her," he'd said, his voice low and venomous. "Do what needs to be done. She don't belong in these parts no more." Asa hadn't asked questions. Questions led to hesitation, and hesitation was the kind of weakness that could get a man killed. All he needed to know was where she'd been seen last, an old cabin tucked against the rocks near Cottonwood Creek. The mare beneath him snorted as if uneasy. Asa tightened the reins and pushed on, his eyes narrowing against the setting sun. He told himself it was just another job. Just another soul the world had already turned its back on. By the time he reached the cabin, the sky was bruised purple and shadows stretched long. The place looked half abandoned, shutters hanging crooked, smoke barely curling from the chimney. Asa dismounted soundlessly, tied off his horse, and checked the weight of the revolver on his hip. The door gave way with a groan when he pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and desperation. A single lantern burned low on the table, throwing light across a woman hunched near the hearth. She wasn't what he expected. Her hair was long, dark as raven feathers, falling in waves around her face. Her dress was patched but clean, her hands trembling as she clutched a piece of worn fabric against her chest, like it was all she had left in the world. She turned, and when her eyes met his, Asa felt something strike deep inside him. They weren't the eyes of a criminal or a troublemaker. They were the eyes of someone who had run too far, fought too long, and carried sorrow heavier than most men could bear. "You came for me." Her voice was little more than a whisper, but steady. She didn't scream, didn't beg at first, just said it as if she'd been waiting. Asa froze in the doorway, hand hovering near his revolver. He could end it quick. One shot, and the job was done. The coin in his pocket would be earned. But then she rose slowly to her feet, her chin lifting with fragile defiance. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but her voice broke differently this time, softer, pleading. "Have mercy," she breathed, the words trembling into the quiet cabin. "Please, don't kill me. I can make you a father. I can give you the family you've never had." The revolver felt heavy at his side. His chest tightened. He told himself it was a trick, that desperate folk would say anything to stay alive. Yet something about the way she looked at him, like she'd seen through the layers of stone and silence he wore, made him falter. For the first time in years, Asa Calder didn't know if he could pull the trigger. The night was cold, yet Asa never felt the chill. He sat by the fire in the cabin, the woman across from him, her eyes never leaving his face. He had tied his horse in the lean-to and placed his revolver on the table within reach. Still, he hadn't used it. Not yet. She hadn't moved closer, only watched him like she was measuring the man who had come to end her life. Finally he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "Why'd they want you dead?" Her lips trembled before she answered. "Because I wouldn't belong to him." Asa leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Him?" She nodded. "Ezekiel Turner. The banker's son. He thought because I was widowed, I was his for the taking. When I refused, he turned folks against me. Said I was wicked. Said I lured men. When that didn't ruin me fast enough, he put money in someone's hand to finish me." Asa stared into the fire, jaw tight. He remembered the coin clinking into his palm. Turner. So the snake had used him like a blade. "And your family?" Asa asked. Her eyes softened, but pain shadowed them. "I had a husband once. A kind man. He died in a mining accident 2 winters past. Since then, I've had nothing but scorn and whispers. I prayed for mercy, but none came, until tonight." Her words sat heavy in the air. Asa wasn't a man used to prayers, but the way she spoke stirred something long buried in him. "You said—" He hesitated, the words catching. "You said you could give me a family." Her gaze didn't waver. "I meant it. A woman doesn't say such things unless she sees truth in a man's eyes. You looked like a man who's carried loneliness too long. Am I wrong?" Asa felt as if she'd reached into his chest and laid bare every scar. 4 years he had hidden behind silence, behind the hard life of cattle and empty nights. And yet here she was, a stranger, speaking truths no one had dared touch. He exhaled, long and rough. "Maybe you're not wrong." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire popped, shadows danced on the cabin walls. She drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and Asa, against every instinct, took his coat off and set it gently over her. Her lips parted in surprise. "Why help me? You had every reason not to." "Don't mistake me," Asa said gruffly. "I could have ended this quick. Still could. But—" his voice trailed, and he found no easy words. "I reckon I've done enough killing for men who don't deserve it." She studied him, her eyes softening. "Then perhaps you're not the wolf they say you are." The days that followed were a test neither expected. Asa didn't take her back to town. Instead, he brought her to his ranch, a lonely spread tucked between cottonwoods and open range. She cooked what little they had, and he fixed the sagging roof of the barn, all the while telling himself it was temporary. But temporary things have a way of planting roots. He learned her name was Clara Dawson. She had a gentle strength, the kind that showed when she carried a bucket of water from the well or when she hummed softly over the skillet. She wasn't afraid of the silence around Asa, either. Where others shrank from his presence, Clara filled the space with quiet grace. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed across the plains, she spoke softly. "You live here all alone?" Asa nodded. "Since my brother died. Never married. Never had cause to." Her hand brushed the wooden rail, her voice hesitant. "And if you had cause now?" The question struck deeper than he expected. He turned his head, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the years of solitude cracked, and he saw a vision he'd buried long ago, a wife, children running in the yard, laughter where silence had always been. But dreams like that were dangerous. "Cause or not," Asa muttered, "a man like me don't change overnight." Clara smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. "Maybe not overnight. But even the loneliest soil can grow if given a seed." The next morning, trouble rode in. From the ridge above the ranch, dust rose. 4 riders. Asa's gut tightened. He knew their look even before he made out their faces. Hired hands, rough with rifles slung across their backs. Clara was tending chickens near the barn when Asa came striding out, his revolver already at his side. "Inside," he said sharply. Her head jerked up. "Who is it?" "Trouble." "Go." Fear flickered in her eyes, but she obeyed, hurrying into the house as the riders came down the slope. They pulled up at the gate, horses stamping, eyes mean. The lead man spat. "Calder, Turner said you'd bring us proof she's gone. Yet word is you been keepin' her warm instead." Asa's jaw clenched. "Turner's word don't mean a damn thing to me." The man sneered. "It best start meaning something. You got two choices, Calder. Finish what you were paid for, or we finish you." The words hung heavy in the hot morning air. Asa's hand hovered near his gun, his heart pounding. For years he had lived as a loner, owing nothing to no one. But now, inside that house, was a woman who had asked him for mercy, who had offered him something more than coin ever could. And Asa Calder wasn't about to let anyone take that away. The riders at Asa's gate didn't budge. They sat tall in their saddles, dust on their hats, eyes sharp as hawks. Their leader's hand rested on his rifle like it was already half drawn. Asa stood his ground, boots planted firm in the dirt. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Inside the house, he knew Clara was watching, her heart likely hammering just as hard as his own. "I told Turner," Asa said evenly, "that I don't take orders from cowards who hide behind their daddy's money." The men shifted in their saddles. One spat a curse. The leader's smile turned cruel. "Then I reckon you've chosen your side, Calder. Ain't no goin' back now." The moment stretched taut as a pulled rope. Then steel flashed. Asa's revolver was in his hand before the first man even cleared leather. Two shots cracked across the yard, echoing off the hills. One rider toppled from his horse, the other reeled back, clutching his arm. The fight exploded like thunder. Bullets ripped through the air. Horses screamed. Clara pressed herself against the window, praying, whispering his name. Asa moved like a man with fire in his blood. Years of fighting had made him sharp, quick, unshakable. He dropped behind the water trough, returned fire, then lunged for the barn where his rifle was propped. The men cursed, scattering for cover. Asa's rifle barked once, and the leader's hat flew from his head, the man barely ducking in time. "You're a dead man, Calder," the leader roared. But Asa's voice rang back like iron. "I've been dead for years. You won't take what brought me back to life." Clara heard it. Her chest tightened. She clutched her shawl and felt tears rise, not of fear, but of something deeper, a hope she hadn't dared to carry in years. The gunfight dragged on. Dust and smoke filled the air. Two of the riders broke and fled, their courage spent. The leader remained, bleeding from a graze, his fury burning hotter. He charged, gun blazing. Asa met him head-on. The two men clashed near the porch, fists flying when bullets ran out. The leader swung wild, but Asa's rage had purpose. He struck hard, every blow carrying the weight of years of loneliness, every strike fueled by Clara's whispered plea, "Have mercy. I can give you a family." With a final shove, Asa sent the man sprawling into the dirt, beaten and broken. "Go back to Turner," Asa growled, chest heaving. "Tell him if he comes for her again, he'll answer to me." The man spat blood but said nothing. He stumbled to his horse and rode off, leaving Asa standing in the silence of victory. When it was over, Asa turned toward the house. Clara stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth, eyes shining with tears. "You could have let them take me," she whispered as he approached. "Would have been easier. Safer." Asa shook his head, his broad frame weary but unbroken. "Easier don't make it right. Safe don't mean a damn thing if it leaves a man empty." Her breath caught as he stepped closer. For a long moment, they only looked at one another, the scarred, silent rancher and the woman who had changed the course of his life with a single plea. Finally, Clara reached out, her hand trembling as it touched his chest. "You saved me, Asa. You chose me, when no one else ever has." He covered her hand with his own, rough fingers closing gently. "You gave me a reason to. I ain't had a reason in a long time." Her eyes brimmed, but this time with joy. She leaned against him, and for the first time in years, Asa held someone like he was holding his whole world. The silence of the plains no longer felt empty. Weeks passed, and the ranch began to change. Clara's laughter filled the rooms that had once been hollow. She planted flowers by the porch, and Asa fixed the rocking chair his brother had once carved. Together they worked the land, and slowly, what had been barren began to feel like home. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara placed his hand gently against her belly. "Asa," she whispered, her smile trembling, "you won't be alone much longer." He froze, then looked at her, searching her eyes. When he saw the truth there, a deep, unshakable warmth filled him. A loner no more. He pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "Family," he said softly, almost to himself. "You gave me a family." The wind swept across the ranch, but it no longer sounded like sorrow. It sounded like promise. And for Asa Calder, the man once hired to kill, life had finally begun.